Yo,
Hey, what's up?
not much.
Sorry, just posting that we're live.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that movie, Postal Service. What is that?
It wasn't. It was. I meant a topic about the postal service. I was trying to set you up for a joke about the postman. Sorry.
The postman always rings twice. Done.
Oh yeah, that's a movie.
I don't know if it's available or not. There's a Nicholson version of that for the 80s that I've never seen.
Probably a reason for that, though.
Probably.
Okay. Everything is good. Let's get the pictures up.
We can always claim that we're the only podcast in the world that is leading with Argentinian horror.
That is true.
Can't say we're not unique. Excuse me. Yeah, because we know how to get the downloads. Argentinian horror, Brazilian science fiction, the big genres.
Our audience is in India, which we're avoiding Bollywood altogether. Although they seem to latch onto the genre stuff more so than the straight ahead stuff.
Yeah.
Our best downloads are like the Joker and like horror movies whenever we focus that on the title. So maybe I'll put Argentinian horror. Okay. Where is the map? I know I'm on here. I just can't see you. There we go. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Get this up higher so they look less fat. All I care about. Jesus Christ. I lost my wife's office normally during the day, so I have to tear down and set up every week.
That's fun.
So it's always a little different every time. And I'm no longer prepared for whatever reason you wanted to come over again. I'd have to buy brand new equipment because stuff just doesn't work and I don't know where it's at. All right, so you ready?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Everyone's a Critic movie review podcast. I'm your co-host, Bob Serrell. With me, as always, is professional film critic Sean Patrick. Visit us at ihatecritics.net, everyone's a critic podcast.com, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handle's CriticsPod. Subscribe to us there, like, and all that good stuff. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Alexa, all your podcatchers. If there's a format that we're not on, let us know and I'll try to get on it. But please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the show and rate and review the show. That does help us out. We'll read your review on the air. And if the next person to do that, will get a copy of the 4K Blu-ray of I Spit on Your Grave, which you can listen to our bonus episode on Patreon, patreon.com/CriticsPod, the best way to help support the podcast. Also there, you can listen to our bonus podcast about music. We've so far talked about Nirvana, Metallica, and the Beatles. We have some more in the pipeline coming. So if you want to enjoy those, patreon.com/criticspod. And then if you want our podcast merch, head over to tpublic.com/criticspod, or go to ihatecritics.net, click on the critics or the TeePublic link in the right-hand corner. All right, got through all that. Let's start our show. I feel like I do it slightly different every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like a robot when I'm doing it anyway. Not kind of a weird week for movies, kind of a boring week for movies. But hopefully the show, at least movies we've heard of, but I think we'll have some interesting conversation. Let's go ahead and start with The Shot Through the Wall.
The Shot Through the Wall stars Kenny Liu as a Chinese-American police officer in New York City who is involved in a foot chase. He and his partner are chasing after a guy for dubious reasons. They end up chasing him into this apartment building, and when the officer, Mike Tan, pulls out his gun, it accidentally goes off and fires through a wall. It hits an innocent bystander and kills him. The rest of the movie is the fallout from that, this accidental shooting. He didn't intend to do this, but he did this in an apartment building that happens to be predominantly African-American. And the young man he killed is an African-American young man who'd never been in any trouble. He was a good kid. He was a potentially headed to college kind of kid. Like, he had a good track in front of him. And so this is obviously fraught with numerous racial issues, and the movie deals well enough with those, but I just don't know if there's a seriousness to this movie that really is sustainable. It's highly melodramatic, but it's taking on something that is very timely and of the moment, and something that's on a lot of people's minds. And so that just kind of resists this type of melodramatic approach. There's an element here that feels like a Law and Order episode where one of the Law and Order cops is dealing with having done something like this right before they leave the show. That's kind of how this feels. There's just not there's no gravitas to it. It's lacking in so many different ways of making this feel more important and more serious. It's, like I said, entirely, for me, it was kind of a surface level approach. I did like the ending, which arrives in a sort of shocking, quick fashion. The movie's only 89 minutes long, so it moves along at a brisk pace. Kenny Liu is very compelling as an actor, and so there are good elements of this, and there's a good idea there. But I think, just for me, the melodramatic choices, the trying to skirt the issues of race while also using those to try and underpin the drama of the story, it just came up short for me.
Yeah. I didn't get to this one. You mentioned it's only 89 minutes. This is just totally off subject. So, but wouldn't it be neat if all movies were the same length, but they just, like, when you're watching it, you check the runtime to see how long it is, but they all end differently. So it's always like 4-hour window, but it could end at 89 minutes. You just never know what's going to come. Just kind of, a lot of wasted money and wasted whatever it takes to have a black screen show up for 3 hours. But would make the audience experience better.
Yeah, I can see that. Most people tend not to check what the runtime is when they go in. I just happened to notice this one.
Well, I notice. I check every time, but I think it's probably because that's part of how I decide what I'm going to watch for the week. Unless you send me a message that says, "Hey, this was really good and I can't sleep." But I'm sure to check those out as well, which we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Is this an American movie then, or is it?
Yeah. It's all set in New York. Chinese American characters.
And there's a lot of. You talk about being melodramatic. Is a lot of it just kind of. You kind of answer the question at surface level, and if we really get too deep, is it a filmmaking issue, a storytelling issue, or just kind of a budget issue? Or
it might be a both budget and kind of a storytelling issue. And I just think there's so many big ideas, and so much of this is fraught with so much drama that there's just you need a wider scope. You need a much more well-known cast. I think nothing wrong with this cast; they're fine, but there's something lacking here in terms of somebody to really grab onto. Kenny Liu, like I said, is great. He certainly has the chops to be a leading man, I guess. It's just you walk into this not knowing most of the faces in this movie, and that can tend to, maybe that's just my bias towards movie stars. I don't know, but they're just
Right.
I didn't grab on to this character or any of the characters really, which could also just be a storytelling issue. Because again, it's just everything just feels like a television drama, and this needs a lot more than that, considering the weight that you're bringing to this with all the race stuff.
Yeah, I just never really pulled you in all the way past the
Yeah,
surface of the movie. Yeah, I get it.
I can only
Uh,
imagine, well, like if Spike Lee made a movie like this, you know what I mean? Like that would just having Spike's name attached to it would make it deeper than it actually is, you know?
right. But it would still be, it's not like you just put his name on this exact movie. It would still be a Spike
Right.
Lee. You know, you'd
Yeah.
have his style and everything that goes with it. Stop Zemlia. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, Stop Lenzia is Zemlia is a Ukrainian film, and it's about a teenage girl who has these two friends, and it's just basically observing her life. And what makes this movie so interesting is that right now, Ukraine is currently under threat by the Russians. Vladimir Putin is threatening to go into that country and take it back. And when you watch this movie, you see just how modern and relatable these teenagers are. They feel like teenagers down the street. Like Ukraine is a place where, at least on the surface from this movie, they seem very Americanized, very Westernized. There's a lot of the similar situations that we have with teenagers here. There's a lot of fluid sexuality, open conversation about life and drugs and sex and all the stuff that normal American teenagers go through. And I'm sure that's the case in a lot of the world, but you just don't see Ukraine in this way because it's in the Eastern Bloc. It's it's right there with where Russia's about to try and destroy it. And you kind of assume that this is sort of, I don't know, back in time somewhere where they're just not quite caught up and everybody's kind of in fear all the time. And that's not the case. These are everyday Ukrainian teenagers who are doing everything that your teenager in your home is doing right now. Like that's what's so interesting and kind of fascinating about this. It's very slowly paced. It just lets these characters develop before your eyes, and you kind of come to feel for them and identify with them. And I did feel for and identify these characters. And I do think this is a drama worthy of seeing. But I think what's happening in Ukraine right now is really adding a great deal to my interest in this movie, because it's taught me so much about who it is that we're fighting for. And like, yeah, we kind of do have to do this. We kind of do have to protect this because there's a lot of vulnerable people there who don't deserve what Putin would likely do in Ukraine.
Right. Yeah, that's
I especially think of the LGBTQ stuff, because this is a movie that kind of explores that sort of idea of the modern teenage sexuality and that sexual fluidity. And obviously, modern day Russia is not a place for that. They're not going to take kindly to that. And these kids especially, would have a very hard time under that regime.
well, and I mean, that's probably not part of this movie at all, but you think about those kids in Russia.
Yeah, yeah.
That are going through all this that you can't.
They
They
still
don't
are
really
going
get
through,
to.
yeah. They're going through the exact same thing and trying to do so without having any of the freedoms that these kids have.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Is there any of that? I know it wasn't probably. I guess it was always kind of a threat, but is that
It's
part of
really
the movie at all?
it's really only on the edges of this movie. There's a couple of references to maybe the older teenage boyfriend might have to, might consider going to the front to fight for his country. And he I think one of the characters has an older sibling who is on the border fighting against Russia. So there's it's on the edges, but for the most part, we stay right with these kids doing really just normal teenage stuff. The main girl has a crush on a boy who's not really interested in her. He's more kind of caught up with this situation that he has with his mother, where they've got a very fraught relationship that is it's kind of weird and kind of fascinating, and in a very typical way, in very typical ways. Like, it's not super creepy, it's just kind of odd and offbeat, and that's just the kind of stuff that you think is fully just American, and it's not. It's a fully, and I know that's just kind of a silly perspective on my part, just from not being exposed to this before and kind of trying to
Right.
ignore, geopolitics and all that. I I don't know. I just never gave it much thought just how relatable the world really
Right.
can be, and this group of very very normal kids under this very massive threat that they're vaguely aware of, but also just too busy doing their own thing to spend much time on.
Right. I mean, odd and offbeat describes teenagers in general, not
Yeah,
just American teenagers. And this movie allows us to get there.
I think that's just such an
I mean,
obvious point that maybe we just never think about it.
absolutely. I mean, that's kind of, and sounds silly that movies can do that, but it does open up your mind a little bit. That's, I've never been out of the country. I've barely been west of Iowa. I have been a little bit, but not much. So my culture is based on, the pop culture I take in. And it is always nice to take on, look at different cultures, especially musically and music and whatever the word for movies are,
Yeah.
the adverb for movies. All right, let's move on to Nocturna, side A. Something about an old man.
The Great Old Man's Night
Great
and
Old
side
Man's
B,
Night.
Where the Elephants Go to Die.
Yeah, there's two different posters here for those watching on YouTube. They go good next to each other, but I couldn't make that work.
So this is from director Gonzalo Calzada of Argentina, and it stars a man by the name of Pepe Soriano as the old man who is 100 years old, and we're joining him on what is essentially the last day of his life. Throughout, there are these little hints here and there. You're never told necessarily this is the last day of his life. There are just these kind of visual and oral hints to that idea, one of which is a disembodied voice from a television talking about how on their last day on Earth, elephants can begin to see the dead and see their ancestors and go towards them. And who knows how you can determine that by watching elephants, but apparently that's just something that somebody theorized about them. And it doesn't really matter if that's true or not. The point is the whole point of that is to get to the old aphorism that elephants never forget. And this movie seems to posit the idea that all of your memories, all these people who seem to be lost, have lost their memory. Perhaps it's not necessarily lost. They're lost within those memories. They're lost within their own mind, where time has become this flat circle where everything is happening at once. And a memory comes back in such a visceral fashion that it evokes the emotions of that, good or bad, and suddenly you become wrapped up in that memory, and that can seem like somebody who is just lost because they're standing around having all of their memories at once come to them, and then you shake them out of that, like, oh, what, sorry, where was I, what was I doing? Like, that is such a fascinating idea of memory loss, or not necessarily memory loss. I don't know what I would call it if I didn't call it that, but it's fascinating idea. But then there's also this kind of aspect of that on the last day of his life, he can see the dead, and he begins to see these very strange things take place. One of which is his apartment building where he and his wife live has been plagued by some recent break-ins. So when a large clattering happens outside his home on the patio, he thinks maybe somebody's trying to break in. Moments later, there's a woman banging at the door of his apartment, and she wants in, and she gets very angry and belligerent. This is upstairs neighbor, Elena. But what we come to find out is that the clattering on his patio was her jumping to her death. So how was she knocking on the door? And again, the idea is that on the last day of your life, you can begin to see the dead. And he's seeing that in a couple of different places. And that creates this sort of horror film aspect, to the point where there's a line in this movie that shook me to my core. Like, the reason I couldn't sleep is one line in this movie where one of the characters just is trying to pull off this kimono she's wearing, and she goes, "Where is my skin?" And fuck me. I was like, oh God, what? No, stop. Yeah, this movie is awesome. It's just, I fucking love this. This is such a big idea movie. It's got so much amazing horror film imagery. That line I just mentioned comes with the image. It comes with an image that is, again, one of the scariest images I've seen in a movie in a long time. But then the other half of this side B gets even fucking scarier because that's taking place from the perspective of Elena and other ghosts within the apartment that our main character is seeing in side A. Now we're on side B. We're on the side of the dead, and that is just nothing but atonal music and horror film imagery from the opposite side of the movie. And man, is that amazing! Everything about this, though, this is my favorite movie of the year, and I just can't say enough good things.
Yeah, even if you throw everything you said out the window and just looked at it on a technical level, it's like, how the hell do you think to make this movie? How do you write this movie? How do you edit this movie? How do you put it together like this? It is so smart. And there's very few directors that I think like, I mean, I don't know how you even come to this movie. You can almost just throw your scenes at a wall and hopefully they land. That's clearly not what he did, because it does, by the time it ends, it all comes together properly. But it's just like a cluster, but a cluster that clearly was orchestrated properly, and which makes it that much more impressive on a technical level for me. The acting, this Pepe Soriano is, he really does. He makes you fear getting old. He makes you, the whole thing is, he is amazing. He's kind of like, he could, if they made like a live action Up, he'd be the perfect guy to play that role. At the same time, it's like, it's an amazing movie. It's my favorite movie of the year too. Granted, we're 3 weeks in, but it's going to be a tough one. It's going to probably stick around for most of the year. I'd imagine we're talking about it in December next year.
Yeah, I would say so.
But it's also not a movie I can just be like, hey, go check this out. You'll love it.
Right.
Only certain friends who are into movies. And again, I'm not saying I'm better than them, but this is definitely not for everyone. My wife did like it, though. Really? It's hard to explain. So the way you told me about it was perfect. I'm gonna have a hard time sleeping. So I had no expectations. I was just curious.
Yeah.
And so therefore I couldn't give her expectations. And at first she was like, this isn't a horror movie. And it is, but on a traditional level, it's not. And that's what's kind of amazing about it. And we've talked about a lot of movies last year that used, really over the last 5 years, that have used kind of that horror imagery. Like Creature was one movie we talked about, but it wasn't a horror movie, but the way it was filmed was like a horror movie. This isn't that. This is more than that. Probably the pinnacle of all those ideas, filmmaking ideas into one. It's that scene you talked about that shook you to your core was such an amazingly filmed scene. I don't even know how they did it. It had to be editing tricks or whatever, but it was so fluid. It was so perfect that at no point you felt like she really could not take the kimono off,
Yeah.
You bought into it. This movie sucks you in. There's no surface level. It sucks you in, and you're just living this. You're following this guy around, and you're living his fears, his it's not even always fears. It's his concerns, his confusions. You're living everything he's living and with him, and it's not even about predicting this or that. It's just experiencing it with him as he experiences it, and as he starts to come out and realize where he's at. It's kind of, I don't know, for me it was more of a where you just kind of an acceptance of death, and it wasn't scary anymore. It was just kind of like you almost relieved to be done.
Yeah, that's one of the things that fascinates me about the relationship between he and his wife, which was deeply fraught with all sorts of issues, to the point where he finds it hard to remember some of the good things about their relationship that's been displaced by decades of utter and complete routine and boredom. Just simple boredom and recrimination about, I'm so bored right now. The idea, like, you reach, it's Betty White nearly reached 100 years old, like that, and she lived a great life and she lived every day, but not everybody gets that good thing. And what if you're not getting the good 100 years? What if you're getting that 100 years where you've just been sitting in a room for the past decade, just kind of, I think I need to go to the store. I don't know. I don't want to miss my show.
Right.
Like, oh God, what a horror. And that's what's so amazing too, is this movie is willing, unlike an American movie, the foreign films seem willing to linger in sadness and allow you to be in a place that is both sad and frightening, and pondering this. American movies, especially Hollywood movies, don't do that. Like, they've got to come up with something that's going to send you home happy. And this is not a movie that's interested in sending you home happy. This is a movie that's interested in just exploring the idea of what it's like to get old and to be seemingly forgotten by society and forgotten by the world. And you're just kind of you just kind of don't die at a certain point. It's like,
Right.
that's crazy to think about and terrifying to think about. But then you've got these other big ideas that are taking place too. Like, I love the idea about memories and memory loss being something where, again, I think it was, and I looked this up. I'm not trying to be more smart than I am. Uh, but Nietzsche had the idea about time as a flat circle and everything is happening. Deja vu is something that happens all the time because you're having a memory that is recurring to you on a loop, as if it's always happening in life. Every aspect of your life is happening all at once. And sometimes if you turn just the right direction, you see something like a broken mirror, it brings you back to when that mirror broke and how it broke. And then you remember what happened surrounding that, and suddenly you're lost in that memory for 3 minutes. And if somebody was in the room with you, they would be looking at you like, what are they looking at? Like, what does this he's clearly lost something, like, because you're standing there experiencing that memory again. And that can seem like somebody who's lost and confused. Or that's fascinating. The idea that your memories could come back to you in such a visceral fashion and you get lost in them, and somebody sees you do that. What if that's what memory loss or Alzheimer's is? Isn't that crazy to think?
Oh yeah. And I'm a person who, like, I mean, I try to be as closed off as possible, almost by a defense mechanism, I think. But like, I couldn't really tell you what my biggest fear is. I maybe lazily would say spiders or something stupid like that. But I mean, I'm always playing mind games to try to keep my mind sharp. And so that, I think secretly, going through what this guy goes through is something I don't want to ever do, and it's not something I think about a lot, but I know I'm always trying to do things to avoid myself from struggling with, my mental capacity. And so this movie really brought a lot of that out. I don't know. It just really was, it was an experience. If I had to compare it to a movie, and it's such an odd comparison, it would be like The Revenant, where I just felt like I was getting my ass kicked for hours. And then by the end, I'm just like, okay, it's over. It was an experience. I mean, but this is one that I'm more likely to go back to. I don't, that was a different kind of, getting a different kind of beat down, I guess. This one was more of a mental one where it was just kind of, it was just an experience. I'll never be able to redo this experience because I've seen it now and I know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a great, just a well-made movie all around. If we go to side B, I think this one it's still good, and everything you said is true. I think you get everything you need out of the first one, and this is just kind of more of a commentary on it. Not necessary, but at the same time, it's impressive and really cool and a great compliment to the first one. The first one stands alone as its own movie. And side B, I mean, I don't even know. It's again stylish, a great idea. Another like, how do you make this thing? Who wrote it? I don't know. Like, where did you begin? Where did you end? It's all that is just fantastic and interesting to me.
Yeah, the side B is basically like an experiment. Can I tell this story from the opposite perspective, from the perspective of the dead? What does the realm of the dead look like? What does purgatory look like? Which is another idea that is in both of these movies. The idea of purgatory, the idea of somebody who's dead and only kind of vaguely realizes it, but they're stuck between life and death, and maybe permanently, and going through the trauma of their final moments over and over and over again. And the imagery that there is, that atonal score, that the use of the elephants. Again, he's got the elephant imagery in the second one is mostly just sort of oral. It's in the grunts and roars of a dying elephant, which get louder and louder throughout, and that is that just kind of sneaks up on you while you're watching the movie, just what you're hearing. And all the way up until, again, it takes you through some of those scenes that you saw in the first movie, but from the other perspective, and that is haunting, to say the least.
Well, and I mean, I'll look at it like music for like. This movie can be made in the U.S. even more so than Side A could. You know, this is like, and it's one of those things where, like, if like Lou Reed did it, I'd say it's stupid, but if King Crimson did it, I think it's awesome. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's so, like, there's nothing traditional about this at all. You just kind of figure out what you said, you know, without having, you know, they don't really tell you anything. They don't tell you it's purgatory. It's not, I mean, you never look at a clear screen once in this movie. There's always, I mean, it's clearly through a haze, through a lens, through the dead. You know, what Gonzalo, is that who his name?
Gonzalo Calzada.
What his vision of, you know, purgatory is, it's what it looks like. And it is so creative and artistic, and because I'm in love with the first one, I'm in love with the second one. At the same time, if Terrence Malick did it, I'd say it was shit. So, but I loved this. I thought it was fantastic and just interesting, and such an art. I don't know. I love the artistic ideas behind it. I'm just so impressed on every possible level with this movie.
Yeah, it's a movie that lets lets your mind wander within it, because it's this old guy is like by himself a lot of the time, and you're experiencing this visually and orally, everything that he experiences, and your mind just sort of wanders through there and gets visually and vocally what the cues are to what we're looking at. There are a couple of really, I don't want to. They're not even shocks or surprises. It just these things that sort of occur to you. And other movies, like, I think Shyamalan, if he tried to do something like this, he'd make something about the revelations about his family more. Aha! See, look, we tricked you, or some shit like that. And this guy's not trying to do that. He kind of tips his hand and lets you in on what you're seeing pretty early on. And when the reveal of one of the characters' fates comes, it's not shocking. It's just sort of, whoa. It just kind of washes over you for a moment. And just, again, it underlines the idea of how these experiences for him on his last day are so visceral and so real to him, even if nobody else can see them.
And I mean, I almost wish this movie came out 30 years ago, 25 to 40 years ago, because being in such a disposable era, yeah. I don't know that how people discover this movie, but this is, I mean, the way I look at these two movies is like we go look at an old classic from the 30s or something like that, and it's just like, holy shit, they could never make this today. Not only could they never make this, they took that and they bastardized it. They just ruined it with every idea they've done after this. This movie deserves to be seen and talked about, because right now I'm having a lot of fun in this very moment talking about it again, because you're probably the last person I get to talk about this with. Because I don't know who I can show this
right,
to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe Josh, but I don't see Josh as much as I used to, and so I suppose cousin Jeff might be able to get into something like this. There's a handful of people, some listeners of the show, but it's such an experience, and I wove in and out of it, and it never, like a great Hollywood movie, an Ari Aster or whatever, would pull you in and you just get stuck. This one, I just kind of floated around. I would come out of it and be like, God, this must really be hard to film for Pepe, And no matter where I'm at, it was just, he just had me, he just never let me settle down. And that experience alone makes for a pretty fascinating movie. At the same time, I think a lot of people would go into this and just be like, never be able to just put their phone down enough to get into it. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Well, yeah. Unless yeah, well, you can't have your phone much at all in a foreign film with subtitles.
Right.
Which this is a subtitled movie, and immediately just people go, I can't read a movie.
Yeah, and oh yeah, I'm glad I didn't even try to. I mean, I set aside Thursday and Friday night. I'm like, side A Thursday, side B Friday. Wish I'd have done both the same night, but I started too late. My wife didn't get into side B as much, and I get it. I mean,
Yeah.
It was just a time thing, but I don't know. This was a lot of fun, and I will not be forgetting about this movie anytime soon. Come December, when you have it on your list, and I forgot that I'm on, you're like, hey, what? No, this is amazing. I'm glad we watched it, and I recommend everybody who listens to the show, you're the type of people that would like a movie like this. So give it a shot. I'm curious your opinions, and if you want to come back and talk about it, let us know, because
yeah,
I would happily do it again.
Post it on our Facebook page. We'll do a special listeners version of the show where you guys can comment and talk about the movie too. That way we can spread this movie around to more people.
As best we can. All right. The King's Daughter.
The King's Daughter is a silly adventure romance, the kind of movie that they don't really make anymore, which you're kind of surprised to see a movie like this actually get made. A mid-budget romantic adventure set in France and the time of King Louis XIV, played by Pierce Brosnan, who had a daughter that he wasn't necessarily fully aware of, played by Kaya Scodelario. She was taken to a convent, or born in a convent. Her mother died there, and the king never really knew that his wife was pregnant, and that he only knew that she died. Eventually, he was told about his daughter, and eventually decides to bring her to Versailles, where he kind of vet her and try and figure out who she is before telling her that she's his daughter. Along the way, he's also trying to figure out a way to live forever. So he's got a doctor played by Pablo Schreiber who's come up with this idea that if we kill a mermaid on the night of the full moon, or an eclipse, and we cut out the mermaid's heart, you can live forever. That's the idea, anyway. They capture this mermaid played by Fan Bingbing and bring her back to Versailles and put her under a fountain and keep her in water. And her song draws Kaya Scodeliario's character to her, because Kaya Scodeliario's character is a musician. And there she meets Benjamin Walker, who's the guy who captured the mermaid, and he's also like a seafaring guy. He likes to be on his ship, and he's kind of out of place in Versailles completely. And they begin to fall in love, and it's actually a really kind of wonderful family romance adventure. This is a fun movie. I think a lot of people hate this movie, which I don't understand. This is not a movie that is very hateable to me. It's very competent. It's kind of entertaining. It's kind of romantic. It's not this typical thing that you see all the time anymore. It used to be maybe back in the 90s, you'd see a couple movies like this a year, but we don't see movies like this very often anymore. So it kind of felt fresh to me. I also liked the fact that Pierce Brosnan and William Hurt have a lot of time together. William Hurt plays his pastor, his go-to guide to talk about religion, and they have wonderful conversations. And Pierce Brosnan and William Hurt are a couple of old pros who are having a great time playing off of each other. Kaya Scodelario is beautiful and compelling and sweet, and she develops a friendship with the mermaid that's very fun. And I don't know why people hate this so much. It's silly, it's disposable fun, it's candy colored, and it goes down like a nice piece of candy.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch it. I'm wondering if, one, because it's a movie you might have seen in the 90s, we're like, oh, we're better than that now. It's probably that aspect. There is I don't know how many kids want to watch a French movie, a movie that takes place in France versus America. Even though a lot of the king
it's not in French, though.
I know, but you know what I mean. Getting to even hit play is what I'm.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Disney, all their kings and queen movies, those aren't in America because there aren't kings and queens here. So princesses aren't in America.
You put the Disney label on this, I bet
huge.
$3-4 more million on this movie, guaranteed. because you go, oh, it's Disney. I'll take the kids to see that.
But yeah, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, this is a movie that probably makes, what's her name? Kaya Scodelario
Scodelario,
star.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is something you could have seen Amy Adams in. You know, she's in some movies like this that made her a breakout star. You know, an actor like that could easily, you know, this is the star-making type movie. But it's a disposable era. I don't know. I don't get it. Let's move on to our classic, The King's Speech.
Yes, The King's Speech. This one stars Colin Firth as King George VI, or he'll be King George VI eventually. But something that's holding him back as a member of the royal family at the time is that he has a speech impediment. He stammers. He has a difficulty finding his voice, which uh, plays out as he gets voice lessons from an actor played by Jeffrey Rush, who has a practice where he's not a doctor. He just has kind of come up with some very unique ways to teach people to find their voice. And when you describe it as a movie where somebody is trying to find their voice building up to a speech, yes, that can sound kind of cheesy. But I didn't find this movie necessarily cheesy. I think it's a crowd pleaser. It's a real crowd pleaser. It's got a very easy way of making people happy. It's a consensus building kind of movie where it's easy to like. Colin Firth is easy to like. Jeffrey Rush is easy to like. Helena Bonham Carter is easy to like. The direction is, very professional. Tom Hooper is a pretty great director. He takes a lot of chances and he makes smart choices, and then he doesn't when he makes a movie like Cats, but nevertheless, it's all the wrong choices there. But this is one where he's not dealing with the CGI cat butts. He's he's telling a very straightforward story and doing it very well, to the point where like I genuinely was compelled by this movie and compelled by the character of King George, even as I find the idea of the royal family to be very, very silly. The fact that it's lasted as long as it has is very odd to me. It's not something I'll ever understand. Having a king and a queen that people look to for leadership is weird to me. But then look at our leaders. I mean, we looked at them for leadership, right, and what do we got? So, I mean, maybe they're onto something. I don't know. But to make that character compelling instead of just an asshole or just some rich, idiot, is pretty good. And the fact that they turn you against Guy Pearce, who's having a good time. He seems like a fun guy who's experiencing true love to the point where he gives up being the king so he can be with this American woman. That seems like he would be kind of the guy that Americans would get behind. And yet this movie does make you care more about the guy who's actually going to lead people against Hitler, which I guess that's when you have a guy going up against Hitler, it's kind of easy to root for him, I guess, in that way.
Fair point.
But I was like, even though there's a scene where he meets where King George or his character Bertie, before he becomes king, he meets Wallace Simpson, and even I was like, no, you're not supposed to do that in a king's house. That's ridiculous. Get those partiers out of there. Pick up after yourself. It's a mess. You're supposed to be the king. And they're like, why do I think this? Why do I care about this?
And you had seen this when it first came out, obviously, because you're a film critic. I had a really weird experience with this. One, I hadn't seen it, so I'm seeing it for the first time. Two, I had watched the Nocturna movies before this. So, this is an easy crowd pleaser movie that felt like homework because I didn't want to watch it, And I remember when we watched City Slickers, we were like, that's pretty good. And then by the time it ended the conversation, we're like, yeah, but it's just about a bunch of white guys and this is about a bunch of rich white people. And it kind of made me feel like, yeah, I guess it is. And I don't feel bad about that, but it's just like, I get why people, it's, we need more diversity, blah, 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 blah. It was kind of, because it was a crowd pleaser, it felt like homework. It just felt like, I wanted something more challenging. Everything you said is absolutely true. I just had a hard time caring because I just watched a complete work of art, and here I just watched a solid movie that was put together competently. That was really smart and good, but it wasn't a work of art by any stretch of the imagination. It was just
no.
I mean, I guess all movies are, but you know what I mean. Like,
right.
Nocturna is something, something in and of its own. You can't compare it to anything else. The movie I compared it to was nothing like the movie we watched. It was just more about the experience.
Right.
This one was just kind of one. I knew where it was going to go and what was going to happen. So he said, "Sit and wait," and so it was just hard to give myself over to the movie, if that makes any sense. But
oh yeah, I
don't disagree with anything you said. Just a weird way to watch it. So.
Yeah,
which is weird too, because one of the things I'm most that I have no confidence in is my voice. I hate it. I have like a mini lisp that pops up that makes saying certain letters into a microphone accentuates that. So, and then I got to go and edit and put all this out. So I got to listen to it again. So I mean, I'm already dealing with that struggle, and you would think I could appreciate this movie for that, but no, this Nocturna ruined everything for me with it. It's kind of a midsummer issue where
right.
who knows, I might hate the next 3 or 4 weeks of doing this podcast. Until Tarantino makes a movie and saves it. We'll see how that plays out.
This is one of those easy consensus builders, and it's why the reason this movie won Best Picture that year is because it's the easiest one to like. It's one where everybody can just go, you know what, I like that one, and everybody does that. Like, yeah, I like that one, and then a large group votes for it because it's the consensus choice, and it again, it's just so wonderfly competent in that way.
Right. There's always 2 or 3 movies that are really great the same year, and they're just like, but they cause a conflict. People either love it or hate it, and this sweeps right in there. This Green Book, Driving Miss Daisy, which
weirdly enough, West Side Story fits that.
Right. Well, even Belfast does, doesn't it?
Yeah, except Belfast too. Belfast is the same way, like a very easy to watch consensus builder.
Now, usually, though, you don't have 2 easy to watch consensus builders going against each other. Usually, it's like Pulp Fiction and, I guess, a weird comparison. Forrest Gump and Shawshank Redemption are consensus builders. So never mind. Forget everything I just said.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, the way this reflects like the Oscars and kind of the flaw, the flaw at the heart of the Oscars is this movie. It's a perfect example. This, The Artist, Green Book, all of them are. I don't even want to call Green Book competent anymore. I hate it so much, but
we reviewed it. You liked it. That's what's frustrating. It
is frustrating.
But
then I watched it again, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're right.
I mean, I'm the same way. There's several movies like that where it's just like, I like it right now, but I see where this is going. Come talk to me in 5 years. Oh. But it is nice to get away from this one a little bit. And, there's nothing wrong with this movie. The week I watched it wasn't the week to watch it. So.
Yeah, another good example. I love La La Land. I will always love La La Land. La La Land is not a Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad it didn't win. Moonlight is a movie that is so rare that it's one of those movies that was just so brilliant that it was undeniable. It was a work of art that was just so completely undeniably brilliant that even the Academy had to pick it. And they tried, even as they tried not to, literally tried not to on the stage.
Yeah. That was, I like what I think that was more for me liking La La Land like that was about what it opened me up to a movie I'm not normally into. And I think that's what Josh liked about it too, is more so which gave it more credit than it necessarily deserved, if that makes sense. I still love Arrival though. That was fucking amazing. Yeah. But at that point you're just splitting straws as far as I'm concerned. Moonlight's a work of art as well.
Yeah.
Did you watch Love Crimes from 1992?
I didn't get around to it.
It's okay. It's still January. Next week, we've got several movies. We probably won't watch all of them, but I'll read them off anyway. I'm Not in Love, The Great Postal Heist, Compartment Number 6, You Won't Be Alone, Clean, Cyrano, They, Them, Us. Say it again, sorry.
Cyrano, They, Them, Us, Charlie XCX, Alone Together. I'm assuming that's some sort of documentary. Yeah.
We haven't picked a classic yet. 1992, Hurricane Smith, Into the Sun, Shining Through, and Voyager came out. But we will get back to you on a classic. Don't forget to go to patreon.com/criticspod to help support the podcast. That's the best way to do it. If you want some of our TeePublic merch, head over to ihatecritics.net and click on the TeePublic link. Otherwise, I will pull.
It looks like you're broadcasting from heaven, by the way.
Say that again. You broke up there.
Looks like you're broadcasting from heaven.
I know. Yeah, I definitely have the lights around.
YouTube fans will have fun with that.
Yeah, I'm already pale as it is, and you got this light behind me. My wife hates blackout curtains, so. All right, sleepers or adaptation?
Adaptation.
Agreed, 100%. Family Guy. Does that count as a movie?
No.
Billy Madison, Freaky Friday.
Freaky Friday.
Actually, I agree with the other one. Speed or The Main Event?
Speed.
Agree. Funny People, Bill and Ted.
Funny People. I think that movie's underrated.
You cut out again. These are Funny People?
Yeah.
I agree. A little overlong. I think Apatow can work on his editing, but I think it's a pretty good movie. The Fog of War, In Society.
I've never seen In Society.
Fog of War, Happiness. I've never seen either of these. So
let's see. Which one has the bigger monster in it? Hard to say. The Fog of War.
What's Fog of War about?
It's about William McNamara, the Secretary of Defense during Vietnam.
What's Happiness about?
Happiness is about pedophiles.
Okay, then. All right.
It's about more than that, but that's the one that people remember about it.
Sneakers, Stir of Echoes.
Stir of Echoes.
I agree.
Weirdly underrated movie.
Sneakers is kind of a good movie.
Yeah.
Attack of the Block, Dracula.
Attack the Block.
Yeah. Ready Player One, Lucky Number 11.
Lucky Number 11.
Love that movie. Bridesmaids, Species.
Bridesmaids.
Malcolm X, Dude, Where's My Car?
Fuck. Malcolm X, obviously.
Sure, Spikey was looking forward to that comparison someday. Angels in the Outfield, The Polar Express. 94 Angels in the Outfield.
They're both garbage. What did you prefer?
Just for the technical aspect of it, like the Polar Express. But I don't like the movie. Mother, the Little Mermaid.
That's the version of Mother I've never seen.
Oh, that's right. That came out. It's the Karate Kid, Little Mermaid.
Karate Kid.
Yeah, I love Little Mermaid. Karate Kid. Bring me back to The Great Gatsby, Red.
I don't know. Which way are you leaning?
I mean, I'm sure Great Gatsby's better. I'd probably watch Red if I had to watch one. I probably would. If I didn't have to watch either one, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, they're just, I mean, Great Gatsby's deeply flawed, gorgeous looking. I love DiCaprio, and just aspects of it are so good. Red is very entertaining. Red, I guess.
Yeah, I think because Gatsby's not good enough outside
Yeah.
of Van Wilder or Milk.
Milk. It's close though. It's close.
See, I'm leaning Van Wilder, and that drives me nuts because Milk's really good, but
I get it.
I watched that movie a lot.
I mean, Milk is not a movie I ever want to see again, but
Milk wins, but I'm not upset about that. But Ryan Reynolds, that was kind of his introduction for me. Mommy Jars and they're not. Cal Penn, right? No, what's his name? Who is this? Who cares? Dave Splash.
Flash.
Escape from Alcatraz, let the right one in.
Let the right one in.
Easily. Rocky the Circus.
Rocky.
Could have gone over there if you wanted to. I appreciate it. Have you seen this? Godzilla versus Godzilla 2? Okay.
Looks awesome though.
Frost Nixon Reality Bites.
I do love Reality Bites, but Frost Nixon is awesome. What a piece of work. Just amazing acting. Yeah, I got to pick Frost Nixon.
Yeah, I inherently want to go Gen X over whatever else, but The Awakening, The Tree of Life.
The Tree of Life.
The Awakening, Addams Family cartoon. Addams Family or Alien.
I honestly struggle with this because I think the Addams Family is so charming, and I don't love Alien. I don't know. I don't know where I'm stuck again.
Yeah, I haven't seen Addams Family since '91.
Yeah.
Alien, and that experience of watching 1 and 2 with Josh and his then girlfriend at the time was not a good one. Because my memories of Alien and Aliens was way better.
Yeah.
Alien is my favorite of the two. I think everybody else would go with Aliens. It's just fun. Alone is annoying enough. Alien wins it.
Lots of people very upset about that.
Lots of people either are just from under nostalgia or haven't watched the movie in 3 years. Meet the Robinsons, The Unknown.
I've never seen The Unknown. Ooh.
Double Indemnity.
It's double indemnity. Double indemnity. If I can't say that word.
I just mumbled through it. Apollo 13.
Apollo 13.
Moonlight.
Oh, they heard us talking about it. The machines heard us. That's Moonlight, obviously.
Rocketeer. It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. Rocketeer is just boring.
Yeah. Changeling or Clockwork Orange?
Clockwork Orange, but I have a soft spot for Changeling.
Me too. Leaving Las Vegas.
Leaving Las Vegas.
And I also just feel like inherently I have to pick Clockwork Orange, even though I don't know. Like someday we'll have to make that a classic because we've been avoiding it on purpose.
All right, well, next week then.
Next week it is.
Sure.
All right.
Apropos of nothing.
Maybe not make that. Wanted Babe.
Oh, Babe.
That is like I'm not like I'm avoiding saying jokes. I don't want to be offensive, but I'm not upset about it. Like 3 years ago, I probably made a joke about what I was about to say. I don't know. It's why I said that out loud. Nightcrawler, Spider-Man 3.
Nightcrawler.
21 Bill and Ted's Bogus.
They both suck. I think Bill and Ted sucks a little less.
I actually agree with you on that. Big Trouble in Little China. Come on, TV movies. Big Trouble in Little China, The Others.
That is so weird. The Others, yeah. Uh, yeah,
I just feel like we're pissing off another, young Gen Xers, old millennials, but Halloween 2018, Braveheart.
I have to vote for Braveheart. Ugh.
Another. I mean, part of the problem I think is that that's just such a crowd pleaser too. It's so easy to, it's in hindsight. I loved it as a kid, but I was also a kid. I didn't want to watch it as an adult, other than the one time neighborhood classic. 4 Weddings and a Funeral, The Last Boy Scout.
4 Weddings and a Funeral.
The Count of Monte Cristo, Jarhead.
Jarhead.
Saw 2, Cats and Dogs. Is that a movie?
It's a movie, all right. Saw 2 by a lot.
Trading Places, Evolution.
That is actually kind of a tough one for me. I mean, I know people, your instinct is probably to jump right to Trading Places, but I kind of enjoyed Evolution in a weird way. Duchovny has rarely had that much fun on screen. Like, you can tell he's just really enjoying himself. And that is such a rarity in his career, where he just seems kind of sleepy in everything else that he does. Even the X-Files, he can seem kind of sleepy to me. He just has so much fun in that movie. That Trading Places is more memorable, but I have a really soft spot for Evolution. I do.
I've never seen it. I need to watch it. It's funny. The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, Ronin.
Oh, again, just movies I don't care about. Like, I don't care about either of these movies in any way.
And there's no way I'd watch either one of them. I guess you put a gun to my head and put Ronin on.
Yeah.
Shorter.
Yeah, that would be the main thing.
Ronin's, I've said it before on the podcast, the first movie I decided I had to go to the bathroom and go pee during the movie, so I got up and left. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. The Hunger Games, Popeye.
Hunger Games.
Braveheart, My Best Friend's Wedding.
My Best Friend's Wedding.
Braveheart or Pretty Woman. I'm flipping.
Fair enough.
And In Bruges, Red Dragon.
In Bruges. More people need to see In Bruges.
It's a great movie. Give me those. Death Proof.
Death Proof.
Valkyrie, Vice Versa.
Operation Valkyrie. Yeah, Valkyrie. Whatever it's called.
Valkyrie. Blast from the Past, Batman and Robin.
Blast from the Past.
So which one is this source from movie like that? Rambo Part 2, Changeland.
I've not seen Changeland. I would pick it over Rambo 2, but
Rambo 2. Not sure we were at Rambo 2.
Flip the coin. Flip the coin.
Come on, God. Nacho Libre wins. All right. Talk to you guys next week. Yeah.